Jimmy Butler. Talk. Give me 1 second. I gotta set this up, man. All right. Boom. All right, there we go. Tropic Baby's in here. Somebody get Alex up here. Ethan, what the hell are you doing? Okay. So for the Zach Lowe reports that you guys are referencing, there's been a lot of talks in NBA media that things may be a little rocky for the Heat and Jimmy going into the summer. It's Ethan, for most of you who are on our Off the Floor Discord, you would have seen Ethan and Greg talk about who those people may be and where that angle is possibly coming from a Northeast team. There also been, some things, as Pat Riley said in the presser, Jimmy is the needle mover. They're not thinking of trading Jimmy and Bernie Lee. Oh, Matt, what's good? And Bernie Lee has said before that Jimmy loves the city of Miami. Jimmy has said he loves the city of Miami in the most recent video. Yeah, so I'm sure they'll get something worked out. I'm checking with Ethan now to see where he is. Maybe some technical difficulties. Matt, if you want to come up on stage, you can. Alex, you as well. All right. Whatever questions that you may have, go ahead and throw them out there. That way, when Ethan does get up here, we can knock those questions out. One second. What do I see happening this summer? I see Miami keeping both. Oh, look. Well, there we go. I see Miami keeping both of those picks. And I see a couple of players getting traded for improvements to the team. When will 5 Reason get rid of dial-up is crazy. That's wild. Yeah, that's wild. Damn. That's wild as hell. Matt, what's good, man?
What's going on?
Yeah, look.
Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're not the one with the internet issues.
That's typically how it goes.
Clearly, Ethan.
Eternal, were you in the playback after the Pat Riley presser?
Oh no, brother, I haven't been in the playback.
Ethan,
there we are.
Very, very.
Wait a second, Matt. Hold on. You didn't hear any of that?
No. What the hell, man?
That right now either. I literally got 4 other sites working. Are you serious? I literally went on.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just a problem with your mic for that 1 second.
Oh, for the 1 second, or did nothing I said got through, or no?
No, we can hear you now. Just go ahead, roll with it. Come on, we live.
But I don't know what do I have to repeat? I don't know. Did you hear anything that I said? That's my question. I heard everything.
The first sentence we did.
The first sentence you did or did not?
Did not.
Okay. Did you hear the whole part about how he wanted PJ Tucker re-signed?
What?
Okay. We're restarting. Sorry, guys. I guess I'll go through it again. That was 3 minutes worth of work. Okay, so I'll start here again. Thank you. We didn't hear shit. That's the most appropriate thing to say there. All right, so here's the deal, okay? A lot of noise out there. We can shut off the sound of the highlights. I know people can do this themselves, and we shouldn't have to tell them that again. But just mute it. Just mute.
Thought I had already muted it.
Just mute it, because otherwise we always have to explain this. But so just mute it. Okay, so now that we have the technical issues solved, let me go back to the beginning here on this. Okay, you're going to hear a lot of noise about how they have to trade Jimmy Butler. I mean, Wes, I think, made a cogent argument today. Wes is around the team, so I'll take him seriously. David Sampson made an argument. I like David personally. I know you guys are going to get upset about that. I've known David a long time. Don't agree with everything he did with the Marlins, obviously. I don't think David knows shit. Okay, so I'll just start there. Like, you're going to have a lot of noise coming from people about the trading of Jimmy Butler. As I said on the podcast today, I think trading Jimmy Butler is like one of the two least likely of the 4 or 5 scenarios here. Okay. Here the most likely scenario to me at this stage. It's a tie. Okay. It's either they give him the full 2-year extension, they cave on it, they do it sometime after July 7th. Maybe they wait to see how free agency plays out or whatever, but they do it. Okay. And they give him all of it, because this is not a negotiation. Like, he's not going to take less money. I'll get to that in a second. Like, this is not about, oh, we can haggle this thing. No. It's a 2-year extension, or it's nothing. Okay. And the second most likely scenario, perhaps tied for first, is they don't give him the extension. He probably plays really hard this season, plays more often, and not because there's some stipulation. There's not going to be any stipulations in this contract either. I'm telling you. Like, first thing, there are issues with that in terms of the CBA that they would have to work through. But beyond that, he's not going to accept any. I'm just telling you, you're not going to accept any. So this is either you give him the full 2-year extension, or he plays this season and he opts out of his player option on the very first day he can, and he says bye-bye, and you never see him again. Those are the 2 options. I know fans think the other options are you trade him now, or he plays out the season and then you deal with it next year and he comes back. I don't see, from my conversations, I don't see either of those two things as viable. It doesn't make sense to trade Jimmy now to some of the teams they're talking about publicly, certainly not Philadelphia. And the option of him, I'm telling people are like, oh no, Jimmy's not reasonable about this shit. Jimmy wants one thing. He wants his money. That's it. This is not about improving the roster around him. You guys can talk about that until you're blue in the face. And you can also get into the fact of, well, they didn't give him enough help. I'm not going to argue on some of that. Okay. But that's not what this is about for Jimmy Butler. As I was saying, and apparently nobody heard it, he's only asked for 2 things, my understanding was, personnel-wise, since he came to Miami. He and his camp wanted them to sign Kyle Lowry and to do whatever they could to sign Kyle Lowry. They did it. They acknowledged afterwards it didn't work out so well. Kyle didn't come down here with the right attitude, and he wasn't anywhere near the same player.
Can you clarify who acknowledged it didn't work out?
People around Jimmy. Okay. The second thing, Jimmy's never said that specifically, but they know that. The second thing is, okay, that he asked for was them to re-sign PJ Tucker. And that didn't happen. So they're 1 for 2. And
that
Ron,
was like a money thing, like PJ.
Yeah, Ron, you can shout it. You wanted Dame, but again, I'm saying things that he asked them to do that were within their capability to do, that either were done or were not done. The Dame thing, I do believe, although the fans don't seem to get it, the players seem to have an understanding that it was kind of out of the Heat's hands. Okay. But I'm saying those 2 things. So the second thing was the PJ thing. And again, I've had many conversations with the Heat about that. And it basically came down to him or Caleb, sort of. But essentially, once both guys wanted to max out what they could get, it became more complicated for the Heat. And so they made a decision not to re-sign PJ, or he decided to go to Philadelphia. You can't argue that PJ Tucker would make a discernible difference on this team. I'm sorry. Okay. The guy doesn't even play anymore. He's basically a retired player. So, if we're talking about roster help and all that kind of stuff, if you were to say that this idea that if you got Jimmy help, he'd take less money because he'd have to carry less. No. Okay. If it's the help or the money, he wants the money. He wants the money, and then he'll figure it out. That's what I was told. Give him the money, and whatever he has, he'll try to figure it out. We can record these, Big Brother. I guess that's Daniel. So what I'm saying is that this is about dollars. That's it. He doesn't think this should be a discussion. And this is the perspective is going to be that this was the Whiteside Waiters franchise before I came here. And we can have very reasonable conversations about whether you pay a guy for past performance, whether you give a guy the balloon payment, all that. I have serious thoughts about that as well, or whether or not you should demand that he should play more games. Okay. Now I can tell you on the games played thing, the pushback on that, and Bernie said some of this publicly, but the pushback on that is that there were really only a handful of games that Jimmy was available sort of, but didn't really feel like playing. That it was essentially they can account for 15 to 17 to 18 of the games that were either for personal reasons that were excused or for legitimate injuries that he had to sit out. That there were maybe a couple, maybe a handful that I don't really feel like going tonight. I can tell you that for Pat, I think one is too many. So I mean, it's kind of splitting hairs here a little bit on that. But they're going to argue with that 22 number all the time about missed games because their feeling is that he wasn't either available or he wasn't in the right frame of mind, and the Heat agreed to the personal time off. Tiny City hits what I think is the bigger point, and I think what really is bothering Pat more than even the availability is that it did seem like he coasted in a lot of the games, and we called that out. So I think that's more of the thing. But again, you cannot legislate anti-coasting. Like there's nothing they can put in the contract and say, Jimmy, your effort level has to be at 99% in these games. So what I'm trying to frame this for fans is that, no, I think Jimmy coasted more even before Kyle got moved, honestly, Locos. I mean, he was coasting the first 2 weeks of the season against Boston and Milwaukee. Like, so we all said it was a ramp up. It didn't really turn out to be that. So did Kyle getting traded bother Jimmy? No. They knew it was over. And they also figured that Kyle was going to end up in Philadelphia anyway, which is what we reported at the time. That's why I reported it, and that he would be happier there regardless. Okay. So what I'm trying to make the point of this is really we can talk about the different ramifications of this and what you would do or wouldn't do, but it's really it's a simple conversation. There's not a lot of real variable here in terms of what the Heat can or will do because Jimmy is very clear on what he wants and what he will agree to. And that is full max, 2 years, no stipulations. That's it. Take me or leave me. Or take me or I leave you. That's a better way to put this. Take me at that or I leave you. And I just, their feeling, and we can have a discussion about this, is that if he left after the player option, that there would be suitors for him. Now, we'll see what the market is. We'll see what the cap raise is too. We'll see how many teams have cap space. We'll see how many teams have value, have a reason for a player like him. We'll see, again, what kind of shape he's in physically at the end of this season. Okay. But essentially, and both Dono and Greg said this when I were with them. And so now I'll bring Matt and Eternal in on this. Essentially, if you frame it as, okay, which was what I believe the framework is here, either you give him the 2-year extension or he plays out the 1 year and opts out and leaves. Both Greg and Alex Dono were kind of like, okay. I mean, if that's the worst case scenario, then you get a really good year out of Jimmy, and then, you don't have to pay him, going into his age 36 and 37 seasons. But I'm just preparing everybody for that because this is not, look, nobody thought Dwyane would leave. Okay. And I was much closer to Dwyane than I am to Jimmy. And I was talking to Dwyane throughout the entire process. And I didn't even think Dwyane was going to leave. I thought ultimately, the sentiment would come back and he would decide to stay and he would put up with things that he'd always put up with, just like he always had. Right. But he was really offended, and mostly Gabby was offended. Okay. That Pat didn't get involved, that they didn't care much. Okay. About the whole situation. So Dwyane left essentially for a worse situation in Chicago, where he actually made less money after taxes. Jimmy doesn't have the attachment to the organization that Dwyane does. Okay. It's been a good fit for him. There's symbiosis in terms of a lot of the ways that they think, not the off-court stuff, but in terms of the game itself. And so if Dwyane left, Jimmy would leave. And Jimmy would leave as an FU. I mean, this is just the way he is. Like the things you like about Jimmy Butler on your side are the things that you're not going to like when he decides to walk out the door. Just the way it is. So that's the deal. And as far as people are asking about trading him for picks, I mean, they're not. I mean, Pat's going to be 80. I don't really think, unless you know you can reroute those picks right away somewhere. I don't really see that. It's one thing to keep your pick, like they've been doing mostly of late, with the exception of the Rozier trade. It's another thing to say, okay, we're just going to pivot around picks. Do I think they'll pay him? If I had to lean one way or the other, I think that they do. But I'm not. Don't say that. But I'm not 100%. But I think either of those two options that I've mentioned over and over are pretty close. And I don't think that. And it's going to come down to pride again. And again, it's also going to come down to, it may not be Pat making all the calls on this, because I felt like a lot of that press conference was sort of Pat speaking for ownership, particularly when Pat brought up, a tweet that I think was on one of the aggregation sites the day before, because I saw it and I actually liked it. Maybe that's how somebody saw it. Was that, about how the top 8 salaries, that only 2 of them were still playing. Top eight payrolls in the league, only 2 were still playing. And Pat actually had to be reminded that Denver was the second one. It's Boston and Denver were the 2 that were in there. The fact that Pat brought that up at a press conference to me was telling, that information had been passed on to him, and he wanted to make the point that, okay, we're not being cheap here. So, again, it may not always all completely come down to Pat, but I'm just saying that, the line has been drawn in the sand, but Pat may have to move it a little bit, because I don't think he's going to get. You're essentially playing poker with a guy who is completely unpredictable, and Jimmy, but he's predictable, if that makes sense. Like, he's predictable in that he's going to do the thing that you would like. Most people would like, no. If he's got a chance to stay in Miami, he'll take an extra $3 million. $3 million less per year or something like that. That's not going to be Jimmy. It's not going to be Jimmy. Right. Pat's playing poker while Jimmy's playing dominoes. All right. You have any thoughts on this, Eternal?
I would say, if I was a betting man, I don't think that man is going anywhere. I think it's business.
No. He's gone.
No, Eternal was right.
I mean, listen, I think when you take into context everything, I think they're both parties. I think you talked about it and touched on it. Greg touched on it on the pod you guys did. And even Brian in the Discord, you can't talk to everybody the same, right? Like how Pat approached Tyler and how he approached Jimmy and how Wade and LeBron and everything else was approached. Like you have to deal with people in a way that you can communicate with them. And I don't think what Pat said was anything that Jimmy would have an issue with. I think Jimmy enjoys people, like you said, coming at him. Obviously, it has to be, you have to first have that respect level for that person in order to have the kind of enjoyment or whatever. But I think that both parties have built. Oh shit!
Oh, we lost him. That took him out. I hope that's not. Are you in your car?
No.
Please don't drive in playback.
Right. It's exactly. That's a felony in Tennessee. What do we? All right, get your shit together, Matt. Go.
No, I'm with Eternal. Like I've said on here before, that I think they pay Jimmy. I think if you let him walk, that could be. I think it might be among the most likely, but I think that also could be like the worst case scenario. Obviously, if you just let him walk for nothing, I think best case if that happens is you execute some sort of sign and trade with another team. If he goes to, I don't know, Philadelphia or somewhere, like they they don't have cap space to sign him outright, and so you could potentially get something back for him. But I think ultimately he gets paid. I don't know how long it extends into the offseason, but I think at some point Pat's going to cave in because I think he'll see the ramifications of not paying Jimmy and having him leave after one additional year. Like they'd be literally right back to where they were before they got him.
Well, that's what I asked. That's what I asked. By the way, Eternal, make sure you wash the phone after it comes out of the toilet. But Matt,
Put it in right.
I'll follow y'all, by the way.
No, but I asked Greg that question, okay, where I said, do you need to get a concession? Like, in other words, like, just from a public relations standpoint, like, let's say you give Jimmy the extension, right? The end result of after all this talk is we re-sign Jimmy Butler. Pat Riley puts out a quote. Jimmy Butler has been one of the most important figures in Miami Heat history, one of the best player performers ever. We are excited about our future with Jimmy Butler as he tries to lead us to a championship, period, end quote, sent by Miami Heat PR, posted on the Miami Heat Twitter and Instagram pages. At that point, is it necessary to get something out of this, like to get your pound of flesh, so to speak? You know, okay, we got him to agree to play more games. they're not going to be able to put any of this in the contract. So yeah. I'm wondering, like, from an optics PR perspective, from an optics PR perspective, like, I'm just wondering, like, what is necessary here if that is ultimately the result? I mean, the other option from an optics perspective is worse, I guess. You don't give him the option. Exactly. And then literally all year long, starting in training camp, you thought Emo Jimmy was the thing. All year long starting, which, by the way, I heard Pat hated.
You heard Pat hated it?
I heard there were two things that Pat was not happy about this year with Jimmy, specifically on the off-the-court stuff. One was Emo Jimmy. So Mike Wallace was right, by the way. Those of you who were taking shots at my guy, I don't know that Mike had any direct information, but he put that out there on Media Day, and Heat fans jumped on him. I mean, Mike is not a flamethrower typically. So, but he said that's not something that would go over in a Pat Riley organization, and I can tell you Pat was not happy with it. I didn't find that out until recently, but yeah. And then the second thing was these comments about Boston and New York.
Yeah.
If we'd asked him about Emo Jimmy during the press conference, we would have gotten an even better answer than Tobin got on the other thing, I think, basically.
And the ramification of letting Jimmy walk, like, what does that do for your future prospects? Like, you're not taking care of yet another superstar? Even though
I think it looks worse than Wade, though, right? Because Wade,
I think to some extent, yeah.
Because, Jimmy came in after the franchise went through its kind of worst period. And then you immediately see success with Jimmy. You didn't get the championship, right? Like, that's literally the only thing. If Miami would have got just one championship, guys, I think, like, all of this is looked at differently. But even still, like, this is the first time you missed the playoffs. Well, you didn't miss the playoffs. This is the first time second time you didn't go past the second round. And all the other times you did go past the second round, you went pretty far. So, yeah, I mean, looking at it and how Glove and Fit, Jimmy and Miami did fit together, it looks bad.
Yeah,
but Eternal really also, though, remember, Jimmy got the max he could get at every opportunity that he could give it to him. They gave him a max, then they gave him a max extension. Dwyane did not. Okay. Dwyane did not. And so I do think that, honestly, I think the Wade thing is always going to look the worst. That's just because the way it is. I think, there was, Heat fans were split on giving Wade the Kobe contract at the end. And the Heat really were trying to explain to Dwyane, we don't have to give you the Kobe. We can give you the Kobe contract, but just wait for it. That's it. Dwyane didn't want to wait behind Hassan Whiteside, basically. And that's a lot of how this played out. But Dwyane was never the highest paid player on the team, not once. So that it's a different, to me, that's a different thing. I mean, Dwyane and Jimmy will discuss this. But here's the thing. Everybody is always going to be like, oh, Jimmy's obsessed with this. No, he's not. Jimmy's going to do his thing this summer. He's going to post a bunch of IG stuff about coffee and horses and tennis and everything else. And he's just going to look like he doesn't give a shit. I mean, that's basically what it is, because honestly, I don't think he does give a shit. To him, it's pretty cut and dry. You pay me or I'm going to leave after a year. Okay. I mean, that's it. That's how his view of the world is not that complicated about this kind of stuff in my understanding. So people are asking, why not see what Jimmy can get you in a trade? I want to be clear about one thing, too, about trades. Everybody assumes that it's always the team out there shopping or executives talking to other executives. You know how this typically works with trade stuff? And I don't want to get aggregated here, but what it typically works is teams start to contact the agent and be like, okay, if we make a play for your guy, would he be comfortable playing with us? So I'll just say I wouldn't be surprised if that stuff is already starting to happen. Okay. That doesn't mean, and then see what ends up happening then is it ends up then getting put in the space like the Heat are shopping Jimmy when they're not. It's just teams reaching out to kind of get a feel. Thank you. Teams reaching out to try to get a feel for whether or not, Jimmy would be amenable to try to play in that city. But that's it. I don't think there's a strong likelihood because for there to be a trade forced here, Jimmy has to go like full Jimmy like he did in Minnesota, and the Heat will just literally lock him out of the facility. Like this is not going to be like a shit show like it was with the Wolves. And I don't think Jimmy wants that. Like I don't think he wants his tenure here. He had no respect for what was going on in Minnesota. He had no respect for the other 2-star teammates. He may not be close with Bam, but I don't think he's going to pull this kind of stuff. I just don't. I think that we've heard it. You're going to hear him be quiet about it. And the Heat have really no reason to talk here about anything until the draft. And at that point, they'll just say, we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about players we're looking at. So that's where we're at. Wade County's asking, do you think Jimmy and his agent are concerned about his reputation? I don't think one bit. I really don't. I don't. It's kind of what Eternal said, like where the organization was and where it is now. Like Jimmy is kind of unassailable in that regard. And if it just comes down to a money issue, then we're at a money issue. Tyler is going to do more of the passive aggressive stuff as I see that post. Yes, Eternal, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean that was Alex. But I mean to finish my thought before my laptop just ghostly failed. I don't know what the fuck that shit was.
Okay.
But basically, I don't see the relationship that they have is one of mutual respect. And then there's going to be some business stuff that they have to work out. This contract extension. I think you did say something I don't think a lot of people picked up on. Is that a lot of people in the Heat spaces, in the Heat fan base, assume Jimmy wouldn't play ball because they're not getting him help. And it seems more like Jimmy is like, nah, fuck that, pay me. I'll figure the rest of this shit out.
Thank you. That's exactly it. Fucking pay me. That's it. No, seriously. I'm not.
Think about it.
Eternal. That didn't come from his agent, but that came from somebody else I know who was like, "It's simple. Fucking pay me. That's it. This is not complicated. That's it. Like this is like this idea again that like you're gonna brighten his mood by going and getting Donovan Mitchell. Like, okay, yes, it'll make things easier, but it's still fucking pay me. Like that's it.
Right.
And I said it ain't got nothing to do with Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
I also think if you think about Jimmy's tenure, especially the last couple of years, it makes total fucking sense. He always talks about he don't give a fuck who's on the team, who's in front of him. I'm gonna bust their ass and like all of it. I don't think it's bravado talk. I just think that man is just wired like that. So I don't really think he gives a fuck about what he has or who he don't have. Just pay me. We'll figure this shit out on the court in practice, whatever. Which I also think Ethan is tied to his coach. That may not be the case now, but I think it was definitely the case.
They have this similar mentality about that. Jimmy is not easy to coach, even with the Spo talking about the beautiful relationship that develops with the 6th year with a guy. I mean, or as you go forward. I mean, Dwyane is a lot easier to coach than Jimmy is. And so is there a part of Spo that's probably a little tired of it? Yeah. I mean, I can. I just, look, Spo hasn't been as joyful for a lot of reasons, I think, lately. And it has seemed like this season wore on him. quite a bit more on the basketball side. I know people were speculating on the personal side. I think that was really the year before. But again, nobody knows what someone's dealing with. And so Jimmy's not easy to coach. Okay. Spo is going to defend Bam till the end of time. He's going to prop up Bam till the end of time. That is, that's the organization guy. Okay. But they know, and that's why Pat said too, like as we've said, and others have said, Jimmy is the ceiling raiser. So they have to get the thing with him right. But I think it's just about money. Like, I don't think Jimmy has ever had any intention of leaving Miami. I don't think Jimmy has a problem with Pat. I know they don't have a problem with Andy. I don't think he has a significant problem with Spo. In fact, it's been constant that I've heard that it's the best coach he's ever played for. And I know that he respects Tibbs, but I don't think there's any ambiguity about his feelings about Spo. So this is just about paying him. Like, they don't really view it, like, they don't understand why this is even an issue. Like, their thing is just pay him. He's earned it. Just pay him.
I also think what may get lost in this is how deep the relationship is with him and Spo, and how deep it is with Pat Riley. I know you've talked about it in the past, how Bernie has said how much Jimmy loves the both of them, and how much he really doesn't have an issue with the front office, linking that with the whole help thing. I mean, they did exactly what he asked for with the whole Kyle Lowry thing, and even, his camp was able to be honest and be like, okay, well, this didn't work out the way we thought it was going to work out.
They know.
Because I think the most telling thing is that we didn't hear any disgruntled Jimmy after the Dame thing didn't work, which goes back to your point that these players and agents know how this business works. But most of you that don't remember, I won't name drop, but Ethan and Greg said that a prominent agent said that Dame's agent fucked up this whole thing by the way he went about it. So business don't work like 2K, unfortunately.
I mean, I think that
Skinny McGee was, but it was more so like a playful thing that I don't think Jimmy was
I don't think, and I know, hey Kev, I know who that is. I'll just, to me, my understanding of why he didn't like it was just felt it was like unprofessional. That's more so than anything else. Again, Jimmy trolling, like, again, what is fact and what is not fact? Did he want to play with Dame Lillard? Yes. I'm not going to argue he didn't. But I don't think that is what we're talking about here. I do know that they tried to sell Jimmy on the idea that the roster this year was better than the year before. I don't know that there was necessarily agreement on that. But either way, there wasn't a feeling that the roster was much better. But I don't think that is the reason that Jimmy didn't play hard in certain games. I don't know what was going on there. Okay. And I don't know that the team totally knows it. I just know the team wants more if they're going to pay that kind of money. I mean, that's it. I mean, the metrics are the metrics. Like, his numbers, we've talked about this many times. His numbers were not as good, this year in a lot of different areas that suggest decline. Okay. So were they down? Did they decline because the effort was less? Perhaps. But the eye test also told you that he had more trouble seeking mismatches, particularly against good defenses. Length gave him even more problems than before. He was drifting out to the three-point line a little bit, which some have wanted him to do, but honestly, that has not been his advantage over opponents recently. And the other thing we talked about a lot was defensively, like, you kind of knew he had a lot of games without steals, without deflections, without kind of the activity stuff that he typically was giving you. So, again, is that age? Is that effort? I mean, I think that's the question here. And I think what the Heat were basically saying is, well, listen, we need more. We need more games. We need more effort. We need more focus on these kind of things if you want to be paid, because we want to know what we're getting. Because obviously, even if he does it next year, he'll probably do less of it the year after than less the year after that. He's already at an advanced age for a basketball player, and particularly for a star basketball player, to still be playing at a high level. I mean, guys go downhill significantly once they hit 33, 34 typically. Okay. So I think that as you look at it, I understand their perspective on it. I just don't really know what their leverage is with him on it. Like their
Why
leverage is
do all that publicly?
Why did Pat do all that publicly? I'll say this. I don't, and I said this with Greg on the pod yesterday. I don't know that Pat meant to turn the whole thing into a gym. Whereas he usually has an agenda, and the agenda clearly was availability this time. I don't know that the agenda was necessarily availability in Jimmy Butler. The way that it came out,
and he kept going back to it.
I know he did, and I think that's what surprised a lot of people, that he kept doing it. But I will say that Jimmy's camp was blindsided by this, so they did not see Pat being that aggressive with Jimmy there. So
I have a theory though.
What's that? Well, that he's 79 years old and he doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks, because that's a pretty good theory.
I would also think that what did we talk about all season, right? This team lives and breathes and dies with Jimmy. He mentioned, I don't think it was more so him necessarily taking shots at Jimmy. It was just more so him pointing to this team goes as you go, right? Mm-hmm. And also talking about how frustrating it was with all of the injuries that they dealt with. I thought about this as you was talking earlier. Mm-hmm. If you think about the 21-22 season could have been a whole fucking disaster. But why wasn't it? It was because Kyle and PJ and a lot of the Dirty Dozen guys kept the team afloat while Jimmy and Bam missed some time, while Tyler missed some time at times. And so, that was the only reason why that team didn't fall off a cliff. But this season, I think, matches up with that one. It's just they fell off a cliff because they kept having so many different injuries and just weren't able to get that same type of production. And also that they blew a lot of these games they should have won.
Right, but they also were overmatched in games that Jimmy Butler played against good teams.
Right.
I mean, how many times, and that was not the case that year. How many times this year was Jimmy Butler against a good team clearly the best player on the floor? 3, 4, 5, maybe.
If we're talking about against good teams, I think you can only point to the New York during the in-season tournament team where they blew the game.
Okay, right. And you know who Spo blamed for blowing that game?
Jimmy.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy and Kyle, because the start of that fourth quarter.
Oh yeah, Pelicans game too. Yeah.
Okay, the Pelicans game, where he got kicked out, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But the New York game, I was there. I mean, Jimmy and Kyle, I don't know what the hell they were doing. They were walking the ball up the floor to start the fourth quarter. And Spo, who is typically not this direct about it, spoke specifically to that instance after the game at MSG. And that was the day that Spo snapped at John Schumann, a reporter there, who was asked a question that was kind of off the beaten path. Spo was not in a good mood about it at all. And then if you remember, they punted the game the next night in Brooklyn because I think part of Spo's frustration there, I got the sense, I don't know this, was that Bam was playing through the hip injury in that game. And then all of a sudden, Jimmy and Kyle just stopped. They knew they had to get that game because they planned on sitting Bam the next night. And they were walking the ball up the floor. So I'm just saying, look, he didn't give enough this year. Even those who are in Jimmy's camp who know that I agree with certain things that Jimmy has done and said, and obviously I've said this to them directly, he didn't give a shit enough in enough games this year. So I understand Pat's perspective on that. I get it. I just don't. I think you're playing with fire unless you're okay with the outcome. If you're okay with the outcome, and this is why I keep coming back to this question. If you're okay with the outcome of you declining to give Jimmy the extension and then him declining his player option after 1 year, if you're okay with that, then you're not playing with fire. You know what I'm saying? Then okay. I mean, if we're gonna say worst case scenario is Jimmy busts his ass for 1 year to try to get paid in the free agent market, but then you have to say goodbye to him and maybe you never have a 22 jersey retirement, okay? Because things get a little dicey and ugly at the end. If you're okay with that, if the Heat are okay with that, then they can play this game of poker. But if they're not okay with that, I'm just saying that is the likely outcome if they don't give him the 2-year extension. I'm not doing Jimmy or his camp's bidding on this. People know that. I'm talking to both sides and people around both sides. Okay, I have my own perspective about what he needs to provide to lead this franchise, and I'm nervous as hell about giving him additional $58 million at age 37. Okay, but I'm saying the one thing I am sure of is Jimmy Butler will absolutely tell them "fuck you." We've been watching Jimmy here for 5 years. I don't care how much he respects the organization. Like, he'll say "fuck you" by declining the player option. If you're okay with that, then we're really stressing about nothing, because whether he gets the extension or he doesn't get the extension, you'll probably get a good year out of him this year.
You know what makes me nervous? That whole scenario right there that you're talking about, because he would leave.
Agreed.
That's also, it just sounds like a worst case scenario. And not only that, like, I think the Heat could kind of convince themselves that nobody is going to pay him what he wants next summer at age 36. And that line of thinking, it might take them to a scary place.
And again, like the optics of letting him go for nothing.
Completely agree.
And
like, I just,
not
what's
just
the point
letting
of
him
this
go
past
for
decade?
nothing, but unless if a sign-in trade's worked out somewhere and the Heat get marginal assets, but letting him go, letting another superstar walk out the door. Like that, again, the optics, regardless of the situation, like how they compare to each other, it's just a bad look. It's just a bad
I'm going to say this. That man has more, like, he doesn't have the hardware, but what Jimmy has done for them in the playoffs, like, record-wise, is just really hard not to focus on.
Well, especially after what we just saw.
Right,
Tyler, Tyler didn't help this conversation. He did not help the Heat's leverage on this.
Listen, I think a lot of y'all, and I think this is our society base anyways, like really microwave. You pay that man, and if you have to sacrifice a season or two, bro, it just like it's really
it really is eternal. Just one season we're talking about. I mean, everybody keeps saying 2-year player option. It's not. I mean, you're ripping up the 2-year extension. You're ripping up a 1-year player option is what you're doing. I mean, it's you're handing him $58 million, and then you may see him play 30 games in that last year. I mean, if again,
you let Jimmy walk off into the sunset. You pay the man, and you let the man walk off into the sunset. But you keep. If that is the case, Ethan, you do what you have to do as far as you can to marginally improve the team, and just go out there and you try to make the best of it. I'll be right back.
All right, make sure to watch it well. Here, Alex, let me ask you this question. This is more of a technical question, and I can probably get an answer, but I don't want to bother certain people on this. My understanding was they couldn't give Jimmy more than a 2-year extension because of the age 38 rule, right?
Yep.
Okay,
so, yeah.
But if he's a free agent, if he declines the player option at age 36, because I had somebody say to me, he'll go get a 3-year deal somewhere else. And I'm like, wait, I don't know that he can get a 3-year deal somewhere else, because that would take him beyond 38. That's a question that I need to answer.
Well, I think the over 38 rule is just for 4-year deals. And so he could get the 3-year deal.
So why is it then that they can't give him a 3-year extension now? See what I'm saying?
Because he's still on contract for this particular year.
So this isn't considered an extension of this particular contract. That's why.
Yes, I believe so.
And so they're framing it as you can't go. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, yeah. Because someone said to me, it was not his agent. Somebody said to me, no, Jimmy will be a free agent who will get 3 years somewhere else.
Yeah. Because you can do, I think, 3 years if you're a free agent.
All right, then that is
up
plausible.
To 3 years.
If somebody wants to pay him until he's 39, I guess good luck with that. But I don't know. I mean, this is a question. We probably should do a whole episode on this as we're stretching this thing out. Like, what would Jimmy's market value be right now? What will it be in a year? Is it top 20 player in the league?
Can I see what happens this season? Like, that's a cop-out answer. But.
No, okay, but Eternal, what we're saying is, like, if Jimmy was on the open market and let's say he declines his player option, he's looking for a 3-year deal next year after this season. What would he be worth?
It really depends on what the cap space league wide is, right? Like what the number jumps up to. Yeah. It just depends. I mean, the league is still working on a deal, a TV deal right now. You know, a lot of things about to shake up. So it really just depends on it. I mean, it could get to a point, Ethan, where, like, you remember when Steph got their first $200 million contract and it was like, oh shit, and now that shit is a dime a dozen now.
Right.
You
The
know,
same
so
thing's
like,
going to happen with Jaylen Brown in a few years.
right. So it's like this could be.
I remember when the Heat gave Eddie Jones $86 million over 7 years, and everybody was like, "Oh my god!" Or even going back to Zoe, 1995 season, 96 when they gave him the extension. I think it was $102 million over 7. But his game is not designed to age well. I agree with you. I mean, I remember the conversations about how they totally overpaid Chris Bosh in 2014, whose game, by the way, would have aged exceptionally well.
I don't know who the hell said that.
Oh, everybody said that.
I know.
Everybody said.
I know a lot of people
said
it, but like that didn't make sense.
They were like, "Why are you paying Chris that much?" Because it felt to a lot of Heat fans, I think, like, okay, here's the cop-out move after you didn't retain LeBron, so let's just give Bosh all the money, and he's not a lead guy. They had actually pivoted. Like, everybody talks about Dwyane in 14. One of the reasons they paid Bosh first, which pissed Dwyane off, even as close as the two of them were, and they had the same damn agent, was that they were pivoting their whole offense to Bosh. Like, that was the whole idea before Chris got sick. Like, it was, we're going to play through Chris. A lot of people said he was not worth that money. Chris would have still been playing now probably if he hadn't had the clots, because his game was designed to age really well. So,
but also too, to push back on Jimmy's game not aging well, I think just like we saw this year with him taking more threes. Mm-hmm. I think you probably see more of Jimmy spacing out. And being more of a threat from three. Not saying that he won't attack the basket. I also think too, a thing that was bothering Jimmy this year is that I can't tell you guys, I won't reveal it, but I can tell you that Jimmy he was bothered by injury all season.
No, I know. No, and they won't talk about it. And I understand that. And I think that's part of why they're finally pushing back a little bit. And that's why Bernie pushed back on it publicly about, you know, the idea of the missed games and that it's not really 22, that we're just Jimmy not feeling like it. You know, it's you know, I mean, you know what Jimmy's nickname was in Minnesota, right?
What?
General Soreness. They still use
yeah,
it.
that's right.
I mean,
it was listed right on the injury report.
Right.
General Soreness.
Or General Soreness. So, you know, this was not, I don't think, like, everybody's like, okay, he was on strike. Look, if Jimmy's on strike, you'll know that Jimmy's on strike.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, this is, he's not, he trolls, but that's different from being passive aggressive. Okay. Like, I don't think he was on strike this year. Maybe he was. My gut on it is that he knows he's not quite what he was athletically, physically at this point. And that's why he was preserving himself to make sure he had as much as he could down the road. My problem with it was that he was preserving himself in the wrong games. Like, it was like, you know, the games were, every time we were like, oh, Jimmy's going to get up for this one. He didn't. Like, he just didn't. And that, again, becomes the question of, is that because of some kind of lack of effort, or was it because he just can't do it at that level anymore? And here's the thing, Jimmy becoming more of a three-point shooter is fine. We talked about this with Dwyane later in his career. Dwyane had some patches where, you know, everybody remembers the purple shirt game and all the rest of this, but his overall percentages were not great. Jimmy diversifying his game is fine, okay? But Jimmy's not an elite player. He's never going to be elite at that, okay? It's fine if he shoots 35%, or even what he shot this year on low volume, okay, whatever. But that's not what makes him special. What makes Jimmy special, besides his will, is his ability to do what we're seeing right there, like take an opponent in the post, like punish an opponent, read the mismatches, okay, all that kind of stuff. It's not like just pure athleticism. So I'm not talking about that. That's not the problem he's going to have as he ages. But it's just his ability to punish. I don't know if it's there. His ability to play the passing lanes and have that extra half step on everybody else. That I don't know.
What he's going to have to do as he ages is exactly what Jordan, Kobe, and a lot of the guards and wings had to do, which is rely more on the jumper, being more like literally when people say Jimmy doesn't have the game that ages, he plays a very crafty game. Like what
that shot there, that midi you're talking about,
what we see during the regular season isn't what we see during the playoffs. Like he does mismatch hunts, but we see a lot more. We see an uptick of Jimmy's mid-range jumpers go up and a lot more three-point attempts in the playoffs. The last two seasons we saw that. I mean, this season, again, we've seen more three-point shots from him, and I can tell you that was directly correlated with him dealing with more injuries. I mean, the man shot 40% from three. Yes, they were like two or three a game, but still, like as you get older as a basketball player, you're going to have to adjust your game, and I think that does make sense for him because you don't want him going in and doing a lot of banging.
Well, that's true.
And that's the problem, right? Because you need him to be like in the way that the team is currently constructed. You need him to be that guy,
right?
But
that's a roster construction problem. That is a roster construction problem. That's if he doesn't do it, they don't have anybody else who's going to do it. And I think that's part of what the Rozier move was about was let's get somebody else who can attack. But I mean, the other problem to look at is, the NBA is being called differently now. We talked about in the second half of the season, but I mean, the officiating has been inconsistent here. But like the way they were letting Minnesota play the other night.
Oh my God.
Right. And the way that the people are reacting to it, like they like it, the fans like it. Like if you look on the tweets and everything like that, this is how basketball should be played. I don't think we're going to go back to the rewarding of foul baiting and all that stuff.
But that also helps Jimmy and Bam too, though. Like the way they play defense can change as well.
Well, I think it helps Bam significantly. Yes,
I was going to say it may help Jimmy a little bit in that aspect. When he wants to be physical, but on the offensive end, he's going to just continue to foul.
No, I'm saying on the defensive end, it helps him, but on the offensive end, but also too, what that does is it forces him to be a little bit more serious on how he hunts his shots, particularly in the mid range and things of that nature. I mean, he's still again, it may not be Jimmy's not a foul baiter, but if I get you up in the air. And I go up and shoot, you can't call anything but a damn foul. Now, there's some of the stuff that Jimmy does that is foul baiting. It is annoying. He'll have to cut that down. But just like, let's not discount how smart of a basketball player Jimmy is. He will adjust.
He will adjust. I don't think, like I said, I don't think anybody's disputing any of that. I don't think that his physical decline is like this. It's going to be more subtle over time here, I think. But also, he's going to miss more time for legitimate injuries now. I mean, pretty much. I mean, Eternal, I know what you're talking about. I mean, pretty much. You name a body part, Jimmy's had an injury with it at some point. And you never know what's going to be more and more diminished as he goes. What he's going to re-injure. I mean, it's been the knee, it's been the ankle, it's been the elbow. I mean, there's been issues with a lot of different stuff, and that's normal. I mean, the guy played a ton of minutes early in his career, and now he's had a ton of these long playoff runs. So, I mean, the last injury was foul baiting. I mean, it's questionable, but it's certainly my issue with that injury is they never should have been in that game in the first place, but it is what it is. But I just, to me, again, as we kind of pivot back to the beginning of what we were talking about here, I'm not going to argue that Jimmy can't still be an effective player. I do believe he can be an effective player, particularly when he's engaged. But some of it kind of becomes to what end, right? Like if you're gonna pay him, you're gonna give him the 2-year extension, and then you're not really gonna add much to it because you're hamstrung by the second apron and all these other things. So basically, even if Jimmy plays more, your best possible outcome is maybe second round. Then essentially you're just giving him the money to keep some fans in the seats here. I mean, that's the thing. They have to have a total framework. Okay, if we're going to pay Jimmy, how do we build this thing so it's worth paying Jimmy? How do we lessen his load, but at the same time get enough out of him? And it's tricky. Like this is not an easy thing. Like, and the other thing is we saw at times that the offense flows better when he's not in there. And they have to figure out their style. Like they talked about having 3 different offenses this year. And Alex, you tried to sum up what they were. I'm still not exactly sure what they were referencing, but it's just like three different offenses. Like they need an offense that scores points, like it's free flowing where the ball pops. Now they did that with Jimmy the first year. The COVID year, the ball moved. I mean, particularly until like 3 weeks before the COVID break. Like that team had great ball movement, really high assist numbers, all of that. They've never really totally gotten back to that. They did a little bit in the 21-22 season. Kyle had something to do with that at that stage, but they have not had that the past 2 years. They've not had that the past 2 years. Adam's asking, is Caleb won't stay? I don't think Caleb's coming back. I don't. Need a guy that's going to let it fly like Max. Guys don't want to shoot. I think they missed Max this year, not the shooting percentages. Max had a certain – we talk about alpha role players. Alex is going to get mad at me. He's got a certain sort of FU edge to him too that I thought they missed this year. Even though I thought Duncan outplayed him the first 4 months of the season until he got hurt. They miss Max's kind of Max will F up, but he's always effing up by trying to do too much.
But I also think Ethan, guys, is another thing that Pat Riley mentioned in that press conference was Spo and the coaching staff needing to deep dive into the offense and defense. I think the league is caught up and they have to just not even just a roster construction wise, but probably a little bit on philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So
they do. I mean, go ahead, Alex.
No, I was going to say, because you mentioned the 3 offensive philosophies team, which I'm not going to get over for the time being, because like we said on the pod after we discussed it, Spo, it feels like he never divulges stuff like that, right? Like he did not have to be specific about 3 offensive philosophies, and he could have been more specific, right? He didn't get into like what the philosophies were. He didn't give everything away, but you got a hint of the way his mind is working regarding their offense, and I think like there's something to be said about diversifying your offense and having different options. But I think the frustration with him, this is like my read on it, of course, but I think the frustration comes from like, well, none of the 3 philosophies were that effective, and we had trouble balancing them like throughout a game. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like chaotic and messy.
Well, and I think probably and we know the Pat and Spo don't agree on everything. My guess is probably what happened there behind the scenes too is that Pat keeps looking at this number, like this 21st in offense number, right?
He said it so many times.
He kept mentioning it, right? And so I'm sure that this has come up with Spo behind the scenes. And look, I'll say this too. Pat coached a lot of bad offenses. I mean, in Miami, he coached teams that couldn't get to 94 points. Like he coached bad offenses.
He knows it when he sees it.
No, and this was a bad offense. I mean, those 90s bad offenses. I mean, Zoe was not an elite offensive player. Like he grew into it, but I mean, it was a lot of throwing the ball to Zoe in the post and him holding the ball for 13 seconds and trying to figure out which of 3 moves he had to try to get the ball up. Like I mean, this was not. Timmy was their bailout player. Like Timmy would shoot a knuckleball jumper, off balance. Okay, people don't like some of the shots Tyler takes or Terry takes. I mean, you should have seen Timmy in action, okay, at that stage of his career. And but he bailed them out, and they just got just enough offense because they just bludgeoned you into the ground on the other side. But my guess is that probably the conversations went to a certain degree, and then Spo is the we have enough guy was probably like, well, if we had everybody available, I would have been able to look at some of these. And I think this is kind of where it's at. And again, if you understand the ownership side of this, if they're paying somebody, they want the guys to play. Now, the counter of this is going to be, okay, Bam pushed through injury and he got re-injured. Duncan pushed through injury and he got re-injured. Caleb pushed through injury and he got re-injured, or at least all of them, it made things worse, okay? Those are the 3 guys, by the way, who I've heard consistently try to push through injury. So when they're talking about guys not being available, I don't think they were talking about Bam, Caleb, or Duncan. The others... I think this was pointed, and Jaquez, obviously, right? Because Jaquez, he talked about, and he plays. That's like he plays because he played 75 games. But obviously, there's some disconnect there with Tyler about when he comes back from some of these injuries and why it tends to take longer. Because they don't have a problem with his work ethic in terms of trying to improve his game, but there seems to be some kind of a thing here. But not just the fragility that he said, but also the idea that it takes him a while to come back from these things. And I never got a handle on the Rozier thing. I still don't. I mean, all of a sudden he's in a neck brace. Like,
why did they let that man play in Indiana?
I don't know.
Because this went from a neck thing to a spine thing. Like, what the fuck
I don't know.
They shouldn't have let him play in Indiana. They shouldn't have let Jimmy play in Philly after he injured himself.
Is Terry still alive? Like, I don't even. I mean, what is? I mean, like these things with them, they just these things just escalate. Like, it's just like always. I'm just so. This is the part of it that drives me nuts because I just think if they were more transparent about some of this stuff, that we wouldn't fill in the gaps here.
And you know what this makes me? What this reminds me of, Ethan? Not that it's a complete parallel or anything, but just like this conversation that we're having about it is. Like, I get reminded of the way that the Justice thing ended, right? Where, like, he didn't want to play new stuff.
Yeah.
You said breaking up?
No, I hear you. The Justice thing ended. I heard you.
No, the Justice thing, the way it ended, where, like, he was, the way it seemed was like he wasn't trying to play through injury. The narrative was that the Heat were, like, they wanted him to play through stuff, and like, he didn't want to. And Justice had, like, some serious back stuff at the time. And now we're talking about, Jimmy shouldn't have played, Terry shouldn't have played, and guys re-injured.
Duncan definitely shouldn't have played. Like,
Duncan shouldn't have played.
Yep.
Ethan, do you have anything to fill us in on it? I know you said that Duncan would talk to you after the season ended.
No, I haven't got a chance. I mean, I think he kind of. I mean, again, he couldn't even put himself at 20%. So I think that's kind of where it's at. I mean, you mentioned the Justice thing, and this is the backdrop for a lot of this: the Justice thing, the Deion thing. So many of these things through the years, but I mean, the Justice thing was basically he came in as a Heat culture guy, and then I think they kind of realized he was a little different about some of this stuff.
He didn't want to play through back injury.
Then he had the injury, and he went to at least 2 or maybe 3 specialists to try to get some resolution on it, and to basically he was looking for them to find. And they kept saying, "There's nothing here." Like there's nothing. And so like this kept getting brought back to the Heat. And like I heard Justice actually got upset at one of the physicians because they weren't finding anything. Like, again, people are in
I was
pain.
going to say the same thing, Zach. I think I was going to say, I think there was a concussion involved that season too.
Yes, there was. So,
a lot to play through, man.
But I mean, think about that though. Like they had a guy that they knew, like they didn't feel he wanted to play. Like that's where they were at with it. And so if you look back at that trade, they actually got a trade that got them to the finals, right? With getting Crowder, our friend Solomon Hill. I don't know that he got them to the finals, and Iguodala for what? For Deion's. Was it Deion's contract or JJ? It was JJ's contract, which they were trying to get rid of, and Justice, and then Deion went somewhere else, right? I mean, it was an incredible trade if you look back at it. Like the fact that this idea that they can't trade diminished assets, like they've done that all the time. Like they dumped Hassan Whiteside on Portland. Like whatever the Blazers have done to the Heat, like dumping Hassan Whiteside on Portland was worse. And they did that as part of the Jimmy Butler trade. So they can just, so for people who are like, they won't be able to move Tyler, they'll be able to move Tyler. It just might not be for what you want. That other thing, 21 Alex says, Justice started the season as a starter because Jimmy missed the first 3 games.
Oh my God.
And if you remember, actually, I was in front of Justice at his locker, and he said he called it his team. He had 27, 7, and 7 in the first game.
Didn't they play well when they were on the court together?
They didn't play that much on the court together.
Well, yeah, because he got hurt. Like
I know, but I'm just saying. I don't know. What would the spacing have been with the two of them playing together?
I'm not even talking about like basketball wise with Justice. It was just something that it reminded me of because it's like it feels like the Heat have a thing for calling guys soft because they don't want to risk re-injury. That's what it feels like.
I mean, I understand that perspective. I do. I also know they've held certain guys back. They've had to tell Bam not to play on numerous occasions. Like that. But then it's funny. They'll tell him not to play, but then we know they value the fact that he wants to play, right? So that's kind of where they're at with it. All right, I got to close this thing up here pretty soon here. We'll do more Tyler stuff tomorrow, and maybe he'll like the tweet again. See how that goes.
Oh wait, hold on. Brian just gave us some information before we close this out.
Thank you very much, Brian.
In the
Appreciate
chat.
it.
Yeah,
I'll read
Brian.
it. If Jimmy opts out next offseason because Miami has his full bird rights, they could sign him up to a 4-year contract in his age 35 and 36 seasons without triggering over 38 rule. An outside team can only offer 3 seasons, and that's probably why somebody said to me, Jimmy will go get 3 years somewhere else. That makes sense. Rozier better play next season. I haven't heard anything different, but just wait till we get to the first day of training camp in the Bahamas. I'll see you at Baha Mar, by the way, Timmy. Wait till we get to that first game and Terry's not there, and then we'll have a different conversation. But my assumption is that he will. Tobin killed Tyler. I haven't seen it, but I'll take a look at it. Ethan, does Bam want to play with Jimmy still? That's a question you'll have to ask Bam.
Have we seen anything that points to that not even being the case?
I mean, I don't have any specific information for that. I said what I'm going to say about that, which is that they don't. I've covered stars who look like social friends, and they've never struck me, particularly over the past couple of years, as that. But that doesn't mean they can't be good teammates. I don't think it helps that pretty much everybody around Jimmy, sort of starting with Ernie, but others, is always nitpicking at Bam. And I don't think it helps that Ernie does it publicly.
Yeah, but isn't Ernie?
You think Bam doesn't know that? You think Bam doesn't see that? Do you think
isn't Ernie just a dumbass though?
It doesn't.
Yes, but that doesn't mean.
I mean, we haven't seen anything from Bernie. You haven't heard anything from Bernie that's like.
I'm not going to speak to anything I hear from anybody else in any other situation. I'm saying what is being aired for the fans, okay, is not. If I was a fan and I looked at that and Ernie is literally posting 10 IG stories with Jimmy on a daily basis, and then he's going on Twitter and saying, Bam this, Bam that, Bam this, Bam that. Oh, but I don't speak for Jimmy. Look. Athletes know, okay, and people around athletes know that the people who are closest to the athletes, around the athletes the most, it is assumed that you're speaking for the athlete, even if you're not. He should just stop it. But that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's just like Brent Grimes had that issue with his wife, okay? There were others, okay, with Meek. There's, this is, when you're speaking out, I mean, Anna Horford, what is she?
I was going to say, Horford's sister.
Horford's sister. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of this. I know that going way back, okay, that, Bosch's wife, Adrian, used to be pretty public on Twitter and stuff like that. And then it stopped. There was a reason it stopped. Okay. It's not, Gabby did it, but Gabby did it behind the scenes. She would just DM reporters, but I mean, that's one thing, but like, it's another thing to do it like that out front. That's it.
Yeah. All right. Well,
all right. That's it. I got to go. Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
all of you guys for coming to join us. You will be able to check this out on the recordings if you haven't been able to check it out. Somebody drop the Discord link. Please check out the Discord. Ethan, go ahead and give them the rundown of the Discord.
Yeah, it's $2.
New 5 on the floor episode, by the way.
Yeah, I put that in there, so make sure you check that out. Greg and I did that. Alex and I are going to do one later today. Hold on one second. I'm getting the Discord link. My apologies. So we'll have another episode later today at some point. Alex, I'll touch base with you on that. Also, make sure everybody checks out our Panther coverage. If you're Panther fans, we did a playback here yesterday. Went pretty well, so we will do more of those. And also, I think we might actually do a Panther post-game show tonight. We'll see if they can play a little better than they did the other night. Unless I decide to go. If somebody wants to sell me a ticket for less than $500, because that's the cheapest that I've seen, let me know.
You can't get credentialed?
No, they only credential one for us for the playoffs.
That's crazy.
So we have someone there. There. Thanks all. Appreciate it.
Peace out.
Thank you, guys.